All right, so this is going to look pretty familiar to if you've seen Pete give this talk, as I started with his slides. Now the challenge was that we normally do this as a morning of classroom and an afternoon of going out to looking at cars and talk about how to judge them. And so we didn't really have the opportunity to do that. And so what I've done is shot pictures that we'll talk through about what we see on them and how to score them. And I've interspersed those along with the areas that we talk about. So we'll go through that. So it's kind of a combined morning and afternoon session. And that's what makes it just a little bit long. And then we're going to have a quiz afterwards. Let me get to our agenda here. Build the slide here for us. And this is the general flow of the day. I'll talk a little bit about why we do it and what we're after today. And then entrant etiquette and judges etiquette and what we do as judges. The scoring methodology and how to use a score sheet. A little bit about show versus street. And then we'll talk about the areas that we're looking at and what we usually see in those areas and kind of how to break down scoring of those. And then we'll have a little quiz afterwards to emphasize the most important points of the talk. So getting on to, what we expect you to learn and why we teach this. But I just want to say that I think that Concours is a really important thing for a single mark club. It emphasizes authenticity. It emphasizes maintaining cars in a good condition. And so you encourage people to have good examples of the cars. And I think every section ought to have a Concours program. I'd love to see a Concours series. And the other benefit of the way we do it in MBCA is that we have essentially a national set of rules. So we pretty much ought to get scored about the same way if you go to a Peachtree Concours or a Concours at some other section. And that's a really strong aspect of our club. Now, to have a Concours program, you need a cadre of good, competent, certified judges so that we get this objective judging and inspire confidence in the entrants. So that's kind of a perspective of why I think it's important and why I volunteered to teach this class. And Pete, if you'd like to add anything about why it's important to you, please feel free. We appreciate having you here. You're still muted, Pete.
Okay.
There, you're unmuted.
Now you can hear me. The important thing here is the subjectivity out of the judging process. In other words, if a guy has a perfectly restored 240D and sitting next to it or nearby is a 300 SL going, you treat them both the same. In other words, you start at 100 points and you work backwards. You don't take any real extra judging interest in the going, nor do you do the 240D. The idea here is to judge the car as it was delivered to the dealer, not necessarily as the dealer delivered it to the owner. So you're looking for originality, you're looking for authenticity, you're looking for just the overall condition of the car. This is very important because once you learn this, you can use this methodology, if you will, when you're looking to buy a car. So I've been doing this for a number of years, and we started this thing out probably about 25 years ago, and we've been modifying it over the years. And if anything comes of this meeting that needs to be modified, I will certainly do it. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say, and I'll be on the background answering any questions or I'll give you any help I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate that. And this being a Concours judge has certainly made me a better reviewer of a car when I go out to buy one too. The other thing I want to mention is I know we have a couple of Porsche Club of America members in attendance here today as well, who are also MBCA members. If you're a PCA judge and you're familiar with PCA Concours, this is totally different. So, do not rely on your PCA experience. This is a much different set of rules, and I quite honestly like the MBCA rules much better than I like PCA rules. So just recognize that it's not the same thing. Okay, so let me slip over to the next slide here. Got it. All right, so what we expect is that you'll be confident. The entrants will see that you're confident, so they're comfortable with you. You're going to find that you personally will be comfortable with some areas of the car more than others, and that's okay. You know, I personally really like to do engine compartments. A lot of people don't like to do that, but that's certainly my favorite. Understand too that not only is this school a learning experience for you, but each time you judge at a concours, you're going to learn something. You know, no one knows everything. Pete Lesler has been doing this for an umpteen number of years. Will admit he doesn't know everything either. We always learn something when we do this, and that's part of the fun of it. You're not going to become an expert immediately, and you're always going to learn something. And enjoy it. This is a fun thing to do. Now let's go over what we expect of the entrants. Now, the entrants are expected to arrive early to the concours. I had one of my first COs used to say, if you can't be on time, be early. And we certainly expect our entrants to be on time, to be ready to, at the time that for judging to start, to have the cleaning materials removed from the car and the car done. The entrants expected to fill out the top of the score sheet and to be able to answer any questions, especially about options or color. And when we're judging the car, we expect the entrants to stand back close enough that we can ask them to open a door or something like that, but not so close that they're either in the way or look like they're trying to eavesdrop on what we're talking about. And you've probably been to shows where there's displays of memorabilia or posters about the car or things like that, and window stickers and all that. And, that's not what we care about. We don't want those. We don't let those influence our judging. And, if they're laid out in the trunk, they're going to obscure things that we need to look at in the trunk, like the condition of the trunk lining. So, we don't expect to see that stuff, and we don't give them any points for doing it. In fact, we may very well ask them to remove them so we can see the car better. Okay. Next slide here. Now, we expect the entrants to have removed whatever needs to be removed from the car, and we really expect them to remove the floor mats. Normally the cars have some type of protective floor mat that protects the carpet, and it's perfectly okay for the entrant to remove that. If it's in the car, we're going to judge it, and sometimes they're better off removing them. And of course, the entrant needs to be somewhere near the car, because the way we do judging, we either have 4 or 5 judging teams that are going to kind of consecutively come look at the car, and the entrant needs to be nearby to be able to answer questions, open things up for us and such. And of course, the entrant needs to stay informed of when the judging starts, when the judging stops, and such things. And one of the other rules too is the entrant's supposed to leave the car there the whole time, not just bolt after judging is complete. If we tell folks that we're going to have a show from 11 to 3, we expect the cars to be there from 11 to 3 so our spectators can enjoy the cars. And the other aspect of that is that if you have a bunch of people walking around the cars and somebody's trying to move a car out, then there's a safety hazard to running over or injuring one of our spectators too. And so we expect the cars to stay there for the duration of the concours. Now for judging etiquette. First, we walk through the field prior to the start of judging to see what's there and get a feel for the competition and get a feel for what we're going to be judging. You may notice that you've got a bunch of 107s, new ones and old ones, and you realize that the older ones have the batteries in the engine compartment, the newer ones have the batteries in the trunk, and that means you really aren't going to be judging the batteries in the engine compartment either, because you can't see the ones in the trunk, just to be fair and consistent. So you have to pick up on things like that when you start, so that you know the scope of your judging and kind of where to start. Now, we do judging by assigning teams for the areas, and so there'd either be 4 or 5 teams, typically with a leader, a second person like an observer, and a scribe. And the scribe isn't necessarily a certified judge. Often it's somebody we get to volunteer in that morning. and it mentions decide among yourselves, and Peachtree will often specify who the team leader is going to be. And of course, judge on time, know what time your results are expected at the scoring table, and work towards getting that done in time so that we can have the award ceremony on time. Now, since we're doing this generally with 4 or 5 teams, specifically doing the separate items on the separate areas on the car, that means 2 teams really can't be judging the same car at the same time. 1, they get in each other's way, and 2, you have to grab the score sheet and write on it, and there's only 1 score sheet. And so you really can't have 2 teams at the same time working on the car. And so you pretty much have to start in a random fashion. You can't just have all the teams do cars in the same order. It just won't work. And very importantly, dress so that you don't have any possibility of doing any damage to the car. I dress without any metal on the front of my body. You don't want anything hanging around your neck that's going to droop over onto the car. I wear a belt that's got a diminutive buckle, and I drag the buckle off to the side so it's less likely that I'll even come up in contact with the car with anything metal. Be very careful about what you wear when you're going to be judging. One more slide there. And the other thing I want to mention is, the team, as you come to start judging the vehicle, you introduce yourself to the entrant, and very importantly, thank them for bringing their vehicle. I mentioned that I think concours is really important, and that we need judges to do concours and have a good concours program. The other thing we need is entrants. The entrant needs to feel that you respect them, that you thank them, that you appreciate their being there. They need to feel that the cars have been judged in a professional manner and very consistently, because you want them to come back the next time. And so always keep in mind the way you interact with the entrant. I mean, you can't be heard making snarky little comments about the car. You can't write nasty things on the score sheets. I mean, the entrants are essentially our customers of this program, and they need to feel respected. They need to enjoy it, and they need to come back the next time. So just always keep that in mind. Respect the entrants. Now, these cars are often, just really wonderful cars, and we don't want to take any chance of damaging or hurting the car. So generally, we don't touch the car. You don't have to get inside the car to judge the interior. What I usually do is kneel on the outside of the car and just kind of crane my head in and look, but don't touch the car. And that's one way of respecting the car and respecting the owner and helping to make sure they come back the next time. When the doors or hood or trunk need to be open, ask the owner to open the car for you. They know the peculiarities of the car, and can do it without damaging the car, and you may not. So just respect the car, respect the owner in that way. If we have to ask the entrant something, the team leader will be the one to do that. It might be appropriate to ask about authenticity of some options or paint or mileage. And you could review the team's findings before moving on to the next car. I don't usually do that because there's usually a little bit of a time crunch getting that done. But the reason that's the team leader is because maybe the team leader actually knows the answer to that question. You don't need to ask the entrant. Or maybe it's more appropriate to ask the chief judge for his input on it. But remember, always respect the entrant. Okay, and of course, it's important to observe the etiquette and to stay within the scope of your judging responsibilities. Now, what I mean by that is that, say if you're the interior upholstery and trunk judge, and you notice something about the engine compartment. Now, do you run over and tell the engine compartment team about it? No, you don't do that. You stay within the scope of your responsibilities, because that's important because of the consistency requirements of judging. We want the same person to judge to look at it in the same way, and you're not going to run off and tell the other team something like that. Stay within the scope of your judging. Pete, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Am I still live?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, this is important. We want to instill in the entrants' minds that we are totally impartial, and we're just looking at his car. We're not looking at the body style or anything like that. And of course, we do encourage them to, if they have any questions, if we have time to answer the questions afterwards. But it's very important that we stay within the time constraints, and that we stay on target. In other words, do not look at the exterior of the car when you're doing the engine compartment or the interior. Only judge what your responsibility is. It'll be the responsibility of the next judging team to find any faults they may find if they're that obvious.
Great. Thank you, Pete. I appreciate that. And the last thing on this slide, be consistent in your scoring. And that's part of what Pete just said about making sure that you're objective about the type of car. Be consistent in your scoring. Look at the areas the score sheet says. Be consistent from car to car. Have the same people judge from car to car to get consistent scores, to be fair to the entrant. Going to the next slide. I just mentioned, ask the owner and the entrant to perform the opening the doors, the glove box, and such. If you're in doubt about authenticity, ask the chief judge what he thinks, ask the entrant, and give the entrant benefit of the doubt. If you're not quite sure, don't take off for it. If you ask the entrant and he says it's something, then go ahead and go with what the entrant says. Give the entrant the benefit of the doubt. And I've just mentioned that one of the members of the judging team will act as lead judge, and they're the ones that talk to the entrant or go off to talk to the chief judge if necessary. Okay. Now, if you're looking at a car you're really, really familiar with, you might see deficiencies in it that other people may not see. Maybe you shouldn't be judging that car, which means you probably shouldn't judge that class either for consistency. And when we take off something on the car, we write on the score sheet what it is. It might say -1/4, crazing in the paint or something like that, so you can actually see what we've done. That's a benefit to the entrant. It's a benefit to us too, so folks can see how we're being consistent and objective in our deductions. And for an entrant who's kind of getting in the way, just politely ask them to step back and kind of inform them of what we expect of entrants while we're judging. And of course, don't be swayed by those displays of all the poster stuff and the memorabilia things. That's not what we're here to judge. We're judging the car. And so also, you don't judge your own car. And you shouldn't be judging the class that you're competing in if you're competing in a class. That's the advantage of having essentially 2 judges on each of the team. For a class that you're actually entered in, just stand back and let the other person on the team judge that whole class. You also, let's say you're on the 3rd car of your class and you notice something that you didn't look at on the other cars. Not that it was okay in the other cars and you saw a deficiency on the 3rd because you looked at it, but let's say you just kind of neglected to look at that thing on the other 2 cars. Well, that means you really, not only do you not go back to the other vehicles, you also probably shouldn't take off for it. You're after consistency. If you didn't look at that area on the first 2 cars, you shouldn't be looking at that area and taking off on it for number 3 car. That's part of the consistency, and we need to be consistent in our judging. Now, fortunately, our score sheet is quite specific on the things that you're supposed to look at, and if you use the score sheet as a guide to your looking at the car, you probably won't make that error. But I mentioned don't have little meetings that the entrant can hear where you're saying something negative about the car. Where we respect the entrant, we want them to come back, and we don't want that to happen. We mentioned not cross-judging, not judging something outside of your area. Also, don't go off and ask another team what they think on something. That's out of bounds, and it gets away from the consistency that we require. And if, you know, we don't want to see irate entrants. I've never seen that, but if you had that happen, let the chief judge or the concourse chair deal with that. You know, don't get in a, you know, a contest with an entrant. Okay, I mentioned the last one. Let's go to the scoring. And look at your score sheets in front of you. We have a 100-point scoring system. Now we make deductions in the minimum increment of a quarter of a point. We don't use decimals, all right? -1/4 or -1/2. There are 5 categories that are judged by separate teams, which I've mentioned are either have 2 or 3 people on them. If you look to the right side of the slide, you see categories of paint, interior, engine compartment, lights, glass, rubber, and chrome, and you see the points assigned, and you notice those 4 add up to 92 points. And there's 8 points left over. Now for show class, those 8 points are used for judging the chassis. And for the street class, those 8 points are used to give a mileage and an age plus up or a handicap, such that a car that has higher mileage and a car that's older gets some extra points for that. You know, for dirt, dust corrosion stains or dirt corrosion stains. And so if you add up the points carefully, you notice that, you know, we're really not doing a who's got the cleanest car. We're doing a who's got the most authentic car in the best condition. And so the emphasis is on authenticity. You know, in the paint category, the split between authenticity and condition is not quite as obvious, but generally in most areas on this, authenticity and condition are combined in each category, with each of them being half of the score. And so if you look at the score sheet, for example, engine compartment, the top item is cooling system, and there's maximum of 2 points for the cooling system, and that means that there's a point for authenticity and a point for condition. So when you're doing the judging, you're thinking about it, you look at it, you ask yourself, okay, is that an authenticity issue or is that a condition issue? And then you think, okay, I've got 2 points in the category, I've got 1 point for authenticity, 1 point in condition, so how much should I take off? And you have to be very careful to make sure that you don't go and try to take off more points than the max point in that area. But use the score sheet as your guide to help you do that. Now, it's important too to recognize that we expect that the parts on the cars to be Mercedes OEM parts. And a lot of the times what you see when judging, especially in the engine compartment, you'll see something that isn't a Mercedes part, and that's an authenticity issue if it's not one of the OEM parts. Okay, I mentioned that. And this is on your score sheet, but I'll only mention that engine compartment for 25 points, everything is either 1 point or 2 point. If you go over to the paint and coachwork, you'll see that most of the items are 1 and 2 points. However, the sight lines and panel alignment is a 4-point item, and the paint imperfections are a 2-point item. And the quality of bodywork is a 3-point item. So they should kind of stand out in your mind. When you get to the interior and trunk, most of the items are 2 and 1 point items, except for the seat coverings, the seats, 4 points. You can think about that. If that's a 4-seater, you know, that's probably 1 point per seat. Or for a 2-seater, that's probably 2 points per seat. And half of that's originality and half of that's condition. Also notice dash, instrument panels, controls, glove box, radio is 3 points. And that's a lot of stuff in there for 3 points. So when you're looking at deductions in that area, you've got to be very judicious not to over deduct, because the maximum for all of that stuff is only 3 points. Also notice that headliner and sun visors here is 3 points. For glass, light, and chrome, again, most things are 1 or 2 points. However, the grille and front bumper, guards, emblem is 4 points, and the door seals, trim, and handle is 3 points. So the ones that are higher points than others should stand out in your mind. And when you get to chassis, 8 points, notice everything is 1 point. And there's only 8 points allocated for chassis, and there's only 1 point for dirt, corrosion, and leaks. And so, you know, editorial comment, I'm not sure why everybody doesn't go show class other than the car has to be 25 years old, because there's not many points allocated for chassis. And very little of it is actually on cleanliness. So it's kind of an interesting, kind of interesting thought.
Gary, just briefly,
Yes.
I think we had a little glitch with the audio. Can you kind of go back to the slide with the 100 points?
Oh, okay. How long did it drop out for?
Yeah, well, it dropped off for about 15 or 20 seconds.
Okay. This one?
I believe so, Diane. Yeah, right here. Yeah, between this slide and that. Yeah, no, go back. This one here. Just kind of briefly go back over this and to the next, because right as you got towards the end, the audio dropped out.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't think it was you. I think it was Zoom.
Okay. So what I was saying here is to look at the distribution of points for paint, interior, engine compartment, lights, glass, and rubber. And they all add up to 92 points. So that leaves 8 points left. Now for show class, we use that 8 points for chassis. And so there'll be a chassis team judging the chassis items. Now for street class, we don't judge the chassis, and we use that 8 points to add basically extra points for an older car and for one at higher mileage. It takes care of those 8 points. And you have to be greater than 25 years old for show class. And so these mileage and age handicaps go up to 20 years and go up to 200,000 miles to give you a total of 8 points. And so for the next slide here, and you can see on the score sheets, there's separate items in each category for cleanliness, corrosion, leaks, and stains. And that's at the bottom of each category, and that's usually about 2 points out of 25 in the engine compartment, for example, or for interior upholstery trunk, it's about 1 point out of the whole 22 points. And so, this is a competition for authenticity and for condition. And it's really not about who's got the cleanest car, although to put it in perspective, almost all the cars you see are really quite clean. But there aren't that many points for cleanliness in our series of concours. It's really about authenticity and condition. And each of the scoring areas are split between authenticity and condition, except kind of in the paint and body one. Some of those don't have an obvious split between authenticity and condition. But we expect to see Mercedes OEM parts, and we expect you to be making the thought process of, gee, there's 2 points in this area, 1 point for authenticity, 1 point in condition, and what I see is, authenticity deficiency, therefore it's some percentage of 1 point, maybe a quarter point to take off for it. Diana, does that cover the area where the audio dropped out? Okay. I can't hear you, Diana. I'm going to assume that kind of covered.
She's muted.
Yes.
That covered the area? Okay.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go up to where I was. Now, looking at the score sheets, there's some fine print at the bottom. And the fine print at the bottom is important. It means there's some things you don't have to remember because it's on the score sheet. If you look at the bottom of the street class score sheet I have up, it mentions that light alloy wheels are okay after 1970 if it was an option for the car, and it tells you to deduct a half a point for non-conforming wheels. It also tells you what the rule is for color change in show and street class. And the color change idea is if the car is painted a different color from what it came from the factory, then it's a half a point off, unless it was a color that was available on that car, you know, that year and that model. And then in that case, it's only a quarter point. And I think one of the things Diana is going to post along with the information from this is the color charts that you could perhaps print out and bring with you to the concours as a judge if you really want to match color code on the car with what's really on the car. You know, at the bottom, it also gives you the additions in street class for how many points per year get added. And oh, by the way, you shouldn't be trailer in your street class car because you'll lose 2 points if you trailer it to the event. It also reminds you at the bottom there, the deductors are in quarter point increments. Okay, let's see. I think we've got a question over there. Yeah, the question is from Greg Toma, Greater Washington section. It says, is it better to have lower quality but authentic parts versus newer but not authentic? It's a very good question. Yeah, and if you have the authentic part, you won't get taken off for it being authentic. Now, you could lose condition points if, for example, it's a part that cracks. Let's say you have an authentic part that's cracked versus a non-authentic part that doesn't crack. You could end up having the same amount of points deducted. One might get a deduction of a quarter point for authenticity, and the other might get a deduction of a quarter point for condition. So that really depends on what the part is. And I mean, I know Pete has an illustration in some of his written works about what if you have a stainless steel exhaust, which is kind of an example of that. So, you know, stainless steel exhaust isn't authentic, so you might lose a point or a quarter point or something like that for having a stainless steel exhaust for authenticity. But the condition, stainless steel exhaust typically are pretty shiny and clean, and the condition's probably going to be good, and you won't lose any condition points. Now, let's say you have the original exhaust on the car subject to rust, and so you don't lose any authenticity points, but you might lose some condition points for visible rust or something like that on it. And so the answer is, it depends. It depends on what the part is and what the condition of it is. What you really want is an authentic part in good condition. And I hope that answers Greg's question.
Yeah, we got one other question from Diane. Becky, how much effort do we need to make to determine if a street class car was trailered to the event? And will it be noted on the registration form?
Well, I mean, you could ask the owner and take their word. And there's also, I just flipped back to the previous street class score sheet. Look at the top. The entrant is supposed to fill the top out, that little box at the top. And notice it's got a trailered, yes or no. And so we expect our entrants to be honest about it. So look at what that says. But, you know, I wouldn't go and hire a private detective to go see or anything. We generally want to take the word of the entrant. And I don't perceive there's a lot of deceit in that area in our club. So I don't worry too much about it.
Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen a street car trailered in.
In fact, a number of the show class cars will get driven as well.
Well, I've seen show class cars trailered in, but that's okay.
Okay, any other questions? If there's one from Reed Hitchcock.
Yeah, Joe Rothenberg, I have one question.
Joe, go ahead.
What happens if there are, how do you consider if there are grill badges and things like that added on? Are they points off, or how are they considered?
Grill badges by our rules in street class are okay. MBCA decals and club membership stickers are okay in both classes. License plate surrounds are okay in street class. Also, if you look at the score sheet, because you're asking about books, there's for the interior, there is one of the score areas has owner's manual in it. And so we expect the people to have the owner's manual, and you often have to ask the entrant for that, or it's probably going to be in the glove box for cars that have glove boxes. So window sticker we don't care about, order sheet we don't care about, but we do care about the owner's manual. Okay, does that answer your question, Reed? Or
Yes, thank you very much. Right. Yes.
yeah, I think that was pretty much the same question that Reed Hitchcock had in chat as well.
Well, I think it's a little bit, okay, he said yes, he answered, okay.
Okay, in that case, we'll go on. I'm going to take a break pretty soon just to get something.
Okay, Sam, if you'll just hold your question, we'll get to that right here. Next slide.
Yeah, I've got, yeah, that's the next, what constitutes street versus show. I'm going to talk about that for a little bit. Now, you have to, for show class, which is the one that does chassis as well, show requires you be at least 25 years old, and you get all, the whole 100 points because the chassis is judged as well. And you know, we expect everything to work, and there's more stringent rules on show. You can trailer your car, and if you look at our rule book, and I'll mention that our rule book is essentially the it's called MBCA National Regional Events Rule Book, and it's available online. And I just downloaded the section that talks about concours to prepare for this talk. And if you look in there, there's a section that talks a little bit about street versus show. One of the things for street, any OEM window glass that meets specifications and including color is acceptable. For show class, all 5 tires are supposed to match unless the car has its original spare. It must be original size. And I mentioned the badge bars and things in the answer to the previous question. Those badge bars, license plate frames, driving lights are okay on street classes. MBCA badges are okay in all classes. Street class, and this is an important distinction, street class allows European headlights on US cars. Show class requires the car has the original headlights. So a US spec car needs US headlights, and a Euro spec car needs European headlights in show class. And in street class, you don't inspect the engine compartment below the body sheet metal, which means, you know, often you can see the exhaust. You're not scoring chassis in street class, and so you're not scoring the exhaust, you know, down below the level of the sheet metal engine compartment. And so a little bit more. Oh, and actually this is the same for both street and show, and that's on the score sheet. Paint color change is a half point unless it's a correct color for that year and model. Okay, so I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, Maria asked about the vintage license, like a license plate, you know.
Yeah, the license plate's not judged, so don't worry about that. You know, I personally like German license plates on the front of my cars, but Georgia doesn't even require a front license plate. So. Okay, so let's talk now about the areas and the scoring breakdown. I think I'd like to go ahead and take a break here because I honestly need to refill my coffee cup. So let's take like 5 minutes. Let me go do that. And, you know, I'll run to the bathroom if you want to. And I'll be right back in 5 minutes or so. Okay?